I ghosted my fiancé and sister after she set me up to be assaulted, then framed me for the whole ordeal. I was 21 when my fiancé proposed. Justin was everything: kind, supportive, close with my family. When my mother criticized my weight gain, saying he'd leave me, he told her off. "I love her for who she is," he said. My sister Nikki was different. Cold, distant, only opened up to Justin. She'd call him her brother and credited him with helping her through drug addiction. I loved her because she was family, but we weren't close. 6 months into our engagement, Nikki surprised me. "Let's go clubbing." I feel bad we're so distant. The night started well. Drinks, dancing, actually having fun with my sister. Then she spotted a guy across the room. "I want to climb him like a tree." She approached him, returned minutes later looking sour. "What happened?" "He didn't want my number. He wanted yours." "Forget him. Plenty of guys would kill to be with you." She said she needed the restroom, then we'd leave. An hour passed. I kept drinking cocktails, waiting. Started feeling dizzy, lightheaded. Figured Nikki had left, so I'd cab home. Outside, I bumped into Nikki's friend James. They'd briefly dated. "Need help to your car?" "Getting a cab." "Me too. Let's share." In the cab, I tried finding my phone but got dizzier. Then blackness. I woke on a hard sofa, head pounding. James's place. My phone was dead on the table. "You passed out," he said. "Didn't know your address, so brought you here." "You slept on the sofa." "I need to go. Justin will be worried." When I got home, everyone was there. Parents, Nikki, Justin, his parents, all standing in the living room. "How could you do this?" Justin screamed. "How could you cheat?" "What? My phone died." Nikki cut in. "You lying bitch, after everything he's done for you." She showed photos on her phone. Me leaving with James, his hand on my back. I was so drunk I hadn't noticed. "Call James. He'll confirm nothing happened." She called. On speaker, James said, "She begged me to take her home." We slept together multiple times. I saw red. "Nikki set this up. She's lying." Justin shook his head and left. His mother crying. My mother slapped me across the face. "Get out." I went to a friend's house. Called Justin repeatedly. Nothing. Mom texted that I was being kicked out. Called me horrible names. Threw all my belongings on the lawn. I was homeless. No family would take me in. They all chose Justin's side. At Christmas, I went to reconcile. Knocked, no answer. My friend called. She'd seen Facebook photos. My entire family in another state celebrating. Everyone there, including Justin and his parents. All smiling. I cried for days, then blocked them all. Returned my engagement ring. A friend knew someone hours away with a restaurant job and cheap apartment above it. I moved, started over. 10-hour days, tiny apartment, but I saved money. Eventually got promoted to assistant manager, moved to a nice condo. 2 years passed, no contact with family. Then a knock. Justin at my door. All those feelings rushed back. Wanted to jump into his arms, then remembered the pain. "Let me explain," he said. Nikki got married. At her wedding, she confessed she lied about everything. She'd fallen in love and realized what she'd done to us. "How did you find me?" "Your friend told me. Your family's been trying to reach you." "I need time." He left. I was a mess. 3 days later, another knock. Nikki. "Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let her in. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I was jealous. Justin always talked about you, how perfect you were. I wanted him to see you differently." "You destroyed my life because you were jealous?" "There's more. That night, James didn't just lie for me." "What do you mean?" "He did things while you were unconscious. I didn't know he would. I just wanted Justin to think you cheated. But James, he took it further." My blood went cold. "Are you saying he—" "I have the recording. He bragged about it to his friends. Recorded himself. With you unconscious." She handed me a flash drive. I couldn't let him keep it. "You knew? For 2 years you knew he assaulted me?" "I was scared. If I told the truth, I'd have to admit I drugged you." "You drugged me?" "Just to make you compliant for the photos. I didn't think James would—" I slapped her. "Get out." "There's one more thing. The reason I finally confessed." "What?" "I'm sick. Terminal. 3 months. Maybe less. I couldn't die without making this right." I stared at her. "You want forgiveness because you're dying?" "No, I want justice. James has done this to other girls. I have evidence. Names, dates, recordings. But I need you to come forward first." "You want me to relive trauma you caused to clear your conscience before you die?" "He's getting married next month. To a 19-year-old girl." She stood to leave, then turned back. "There's something else about Justin you should know." What? He knew within a week that you were telling the truth. What? James's roommate told him nothing happened. You were on the couch all night. Justin chose to believe the lie anyway. He said it was easier than admitting he was wrong. My legs gave out. He knew? Your mom knew too. They all did. The roommate told everyone at a family dinner. They decided to maintain the lie rather than apologize. Why are you telling me this now? Because James kept videos of all his victims, and last week he posted one online. Of you. Your face is blurred, but Justin recognized the dress. He's not here to apologize. He's here because he's afraid you'll find out and sue them all. She left the flash drive on my table. The wedding is in 3 weeks. His fiancé's name is Julienne. She's my husband's little sister. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the flash drive Nikki left behind. My hand kept reaching for it, then pulling back like the plastic casing might burn my skin. The thing was small enough to fit in my palm but felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. James recorded himself assaulting me while I was unconscious. The thought made my stomach turn over and over until I had to run to the bathroom and dry heave into the toilet. I kept thinking about Julienne, 19 years old and about to marry a monster who collected videos of women he'd drugged and raped. Every time I considered throwing the drive away or pretending Nikki never showed up at my door, I saw her face in my mind. Young and trusting and completely unaware of what James really was. Hours passed while I sat there frozen. The sun went down outside my window. My phone showed 11:47 p.m. when I finally picked it up and called Violet. She answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. I told her I needed her to come over right now, that something bad had happened. She didn't ask questions, just said she'd be there in 20 minutes and was bringing her mom. They arrived together at 12:15 a.m., Violet still in pajama pants and Nadine carrying a thermos of tea. I started crying the moment they walked through my door, ugly sobbing that made my whole body shake. Nadine guided me to the couch while Violet sat on my other side, and I told them everything. About Justin showing up and then Nikki's confession about drugging me and James assaulting me while I was unconscious. About the flash drive full of evidence and other victims. About Justin knowing the truth within a week and choosing the lie anyway, because it was easier than admitting he was wrong. Nadine held my hand while I talked, her grip steady and warm. Violet kept passing me tissues and didn't say anything except to ask clarifying questions when I got too worked up to make sense. When I finished, we all sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Nadine spoke and said I needed to go to the police with the flash drive, that James couldn't be allowed to hurt anyone else. Violet agreed but said I should take a few days first to process everything, that I didn't have to rush into anything. I told them about Julienne and the wedding in 3 weeks. Nadine's face went hard, and she said then we definitely couldn't wait. We stayed up until almost 4 a.m, the 3 of us drinking tea and talking through what I should do next. Violet made me promise to call in sick to work the next day so I could rest. Nadine said she'd cover my shifts personally, and I shouldn't worry about anything except taking care of myself. They both hugged me before they left, and I locked the door behind them, feeling slightly less alone than I had a few hours earlier. The next morning came too fast. I barely slept, just lay in bed staring at my ceiling and thinking about everything Nikki had told me. My alarm went off at 6:30 for my usual shift. I got up and showered and put on my work clothes out of pure habit, my body moving on autopilot while my brain stayed stuck on the flash drive sitting on my kitchen table. I drove to the restaurant and walked in through the back entrance like I did every morning. The kitchen was already hot from the breakfast prep, and the familiar smell of coffee and bacon usually made me feel grounded. Today, it just made me nauseous. I tied on my apron and started working the grill, flipping pancakes and frying eggs while the morning rush started. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped a plate. Then I wasn't paying attention and reached for a pan handle without a towel, burning my palm on the hot metal. I jerked back and knocked over a container of batter that spilled across the floor. Nadine appeared beside me within seconds. She took the spatula from my hand and told Hope to take over the grill. Then she guided me to her office in the back and shut the door. I started apologizing, but she cut me off and said I was taking the rest of the week off with full pay, and she didn't want to hear any arguments about it. I tried to protest that I couldn't just abandon my shifts during a busy week. She looked at me with those steady brown eyes and said my mental health was more important than any breakfast rush, and if I didn't go home right now, she'd physically carry me to my car. I left through the back door and sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes, crying again because I couldn't believe how lucky I was to have people like Nadine and Violet in my life. Wednesday afternoon arrived after 2 days of me pacing around my apartment, unable to think about anything except the flash drive. I'd pick it up and set it down dozens of times. I'd sit at my laptop and move the mouse toward the USB port, then chicken out and close the computer. The idea of seeing myself on that video made my skin crawl, but not knowing exactly what James had done felt almost worse. Finally, around 3 o'clock, I couldn't take it anymore. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop before I could change my mind again. The folder structure appeared on my screen, neat and organized like James was keeping some kind of sick collection. There were 12 folders total, each one labeled with a girl's first name and a date. My hands were shaking, so badly I could barely control the mouse as I scrolled through the list. Sarah 2019, Michelle 2020, Amanda 2021. The dates went back 5 years in a clear pattern. I found my own name near the bottom, the date from that night 2 years ago when Nikki had drugged me and James had taken me to his apartment. I clicked on my folder and a video file appeared. My cursor hovered over it for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then I closed the folder without playing it. I couldn't watch it. Just knowing it existed was bad enough. But I forced myself to look at enough of the thumbnail to confirm Nikki had been telling the truth. The image showed me unconscious on a couch, and that was all I needed to see before I closed the window and ran to the bathroom to throw up. I went back to my laptop after washing my face and brushing my teeth. This time I opened the other folders one by one, not watching the videos but checking the file names and dates. 11 other girls. 11 other women James had drugged and assaulted and recorded like we were some kind of trophy collection. Some folders had multiple files, meaning he'd done it to the same girl more than once. I sat back from my computer feeling cold all over despite the warm apartment. James had been doing this for at least 5 years, probably longer. How many other victims were there that Nikki didn't know about? How many girls had woken up confused and violated, not knowing what had really happened to them? I thought about Julianne again, young and excited about her wedding, completely unaware she was about to marry a serial predator. The flash drive suddenly felt like the most important thing I'd ever held. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every girl James had hurt and every girl he might hurt in the future if someone didn't stop him. Thursday morning, I woke up early and got dressed in actual clothes instead of pajamas for the first time in 3 days. I put the flash drive in my purse and drove to the police station before I could talk myself out of it. The building was old brick with a parking lot out front, and I sat in my car for 5 minutes working up the courage to go inside. Finally, I forced myself out and walked through the front doors into a lobby with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs. A bored-looking officer sat behind a desk near the entrance. I walked up to him and said I needed to speak with someone about a sexual assault. He barely looked up from his computer and asked when the assault occurred. I told him 2 years ago. He sighed and started to hand me a form to fill out, clearly thinking this was going to be another cold case that went nowhere. Then I added that I had video evidence of multiple assaults by the same person. His whole demeanor changed instantly. He picked up his phone and made a quick call, then told me to wait while someone came to get me. 5 minutes later, a man in a suit appeared and introduced himself as Detective Philip Townsend. He was probably in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes that made me feel slightly less like I might throw up. He led me back through a maze of hallways to a small office with a desk and 2 chairs. Philip gestured for me to sit down and closed the door behind us. He didn't rush me or act impatient while I tried to figure out how to start explaining everything. Instead, he just waited quietly until I was ready to talk. I started from the beginning, telling him about that night 2 years ago when my sister drugged me and James assaulted me while I was unconscious. I explained about the false cheating accusation and how my entire family had abandoned me based on lies. I told him about Nikki showing up at my apartment with her deathbed confession and the flash drive full of evidence. Philip took notes the whole time without interrupting me once, just nodding occasionally to show he was listening. When I finished talking, I pulled the flash drive from my purse and set it on his desk. He picked it up carefully, holding it like it was made of gold or something equally precious. He said this was extremely important evidence and asked if I was okay with him looking at the contents. I nodded and he plugged it into his computer, spending several minutes clicking through folders while I sat there trying not to think about what he was seeing. Philip finally looked up from his screen and his expression was serious. He explained that because I was unconscious during the assault and had been drugged without my knowledge, this constituted a serious felony case. The fact that James had recorded it made things even worse legally. He said the other videos on the flash drive could help establish a pattern of behavior that would strengthen the case significantly. But identifying and contacting all the other victims would take time, probably weeks or even months. He asked if I knew any of the other girls' full names or had any way to contact them. I shook my head and said the folders only had first names and dates. Philip nodded and said they'd start by trying to match the dates to missing persons reports or assault reports from those time periods. He asked detailed questions about James, getting his full name and last known address and any other information I could provide. I told him about the upcoming wedding to Julianne in less than 3 weeks. Philip's jaw tightened and he said they'd do everything possible to build a case before that happened. He took my contact information and said someone from the prosecutor's office would be in touch soon. Then he walked me back to the lobby and shook my hand, thanking me for coming forward. He said what I was doing took real courage and could prevent James from hurting anyone else. I walked out of the police station feeling strange and empty, like I'd been carrying something heavy for 2 years and suddenly put it down. My legs felt wobbly and my head was spinning, but in a different way than before. Violet was waiting in the parking lot like I'd asked her to be. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug without saying anything. We got into her car and she drove us to a coffee shop a few blocks away. She ordered us both drinks, and we sat at a corner table for over an hour while I stared at my latte and tried to process what I'd just done. Violet didn't push me to talk or try to tell me everything would be okay. She just sat across from me and let me be silent, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand. Finally, I looked up at her and said I couldn't believe I'd actually done it, that I'd walked into a police station and reported what James did to me. She smiled and said she was proud of me, that it took real strength to face something that traumatic. I started crying again, not sad tears this time, but something more complicated that I didn't have words for. Violet passed me napkins and waited while I pulled myself together. Eventually, we left the coffee shop and she drove me home, making me promise to call her if I needed anything at all. That evening, I was making dinner when someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Justin standing in the hallway. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home, but then anger flooded through me hot and sharp. I yanked the door open and stood there staring at him. He looked uncomfortable and started to say something, but I cut him off and told him to get inside because we were going to talk about why he kept lying when he knew the truth. He followed me into my apartment and I shut the door behind him. This time I wasn't sad or confused or hoping for reconciliation. I was furious, and I wanted answers, and I wasn't going to let him leave until he explained himself. Justin paced across my small living room and stopped by the window. He turned back to face me with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. His voice came out quiet when he finally started talking. Wallace told him the truth about that night less than a week after everything happened. James's roommate had been at a family dinner and pulled Justin aside. He explained that I'd been passed out on the couch the whole night and James had been in his own room. Wallace said he felt sick about lying on that phone call, but James had threatened him. Justin stood there in my apartment looking at the floor while he admitted all of this. He said by that point he'd already screamed at me in front of both our families. His parents had cried. My mother had thrown me out. Everyone had chosen sides and made their positions clear. He felt trapped by his own actions and thought it would be easier to just keep going with the lie than admit he'd been cruel and wrong. The words came out of him like he was confessing to something small instead of destroying my entire life. I felt my hands start to shake. I asked him straight out if he was here because he actually felt bad or because he was scared about legal problems now that the video was online. His face changed completely when I said that. The fake sadness dropped away and I could see the calculation behind his eyes. He started to say something about how he'd always cared about me, but I cut him off. I told him to get out of my apartment. My voice came out calm and steady in a way that surprised both of us. He opened his mouth to argue, but I walked to the door and held it open. He left without another word, and I locked the door behind him. I stood there for a long time just breathing and feeling nothing at all. Philip called me early the next morning while I was getting ready for work. His voice sounded tired but determined. They'd gone through all the files on the flash drive and identified 3 other victims so far. They were still working on finding contact information for the rest. He asked if I'd be willing to talk to a victim advocate who could help me understand the legal process and connect me with other survivors. I said yes before I could think about it too much. He gave me a name and number for someone at the local crisis center. Anna Kirk. He said she was good at her job and wouldn't push me to do anything I wasn't ready for. I wrote down the information on a napkin and stared at it for the rest of the morning. I met Anna at the crisis center on Monday afternoon. The building was small and painted a soft blue color that was probably supposed to be calming. She met me in the lobby and led me back to a quiet office with comfortable chairs. Anna was maybe in her 40s with short dark hair and glasses. She didn't look at me with pity or try to tell me everything would be okay. Instead, she just asked what I needed to know. I told her I didn't know what to expect from any of this. She explained how the investigation would probably go. Police interviews and evidence collection, possible court appearances if charges were filed. She talked about how to handle the thoughts that would probably come up about the assault. Things I might not have let myself think about before. She gave me papers with information about trauma therapy and support groups. Her voice stayed even and professional the whole time, but not cold. Just honest about what was ahead. Near the end of our meeting, I brought up Julianne. Anna's expression shifted slightly when I mentioned the wedding timeline. She explained that warning someone directly in a case like this could be tricky. It might interfere with the investigation if James got spooked and destroyed evidence or intimidated other victims. But she also said she understood why I felt so worried about this girl marrying him in less than 3 weeks. She suggested we could talk to the prosecutor's office about the best way to handle it. Maybe there was an approach that would protect Julianne without messing up the case. I left the crisis center feeling both better and worse than when I'd arrived. The next few days were strange and disconnected. I went to work and did my job, but my brain wouldn't stop obsessing over Julianne. 2.5 weeks until she married James. 2.5 weeks until her wedding night. I kept imagining her drugged and unconscious while he recorded himself. Violet and Hope noticed I was distracted. They came over on Tuesday night with ice cream and made me watch movies with them. Hope picked a comedy that was supposed to be funny, but I couldn't focus on it. Violet kept squeezing my hand during the serious parts like she was trying to anchor me to the present. I appreciated them trying, but nothing could stop my brain from counting down the days. Philip called again on Wednesday while I was at the restaurant. I stepped outside to take it. He said they'd managed to contact 7 victims total from the videos. 4 of them were willing to come forward with formal statements. His voice got more intense when he talked about trying to arrest James before the wedding. He was pushing hard to get enough evidence together quickly. But the prosecutor wanted everything perfect to make sure they could get a conviction. Every piece of evidence documented correctly. Every witness statement detailed and consistent. I understood why that mattered, but it felt like watching a countdown timer while everyone else moved in slow motion. That same afternoon, my phone started buzzing with texts from my mother. I hadn't heard from her since I'd blocked her 2 years ago, but apparently she'd gotten a new number. The messages said she'd heard I was making accusations. She demanded I stop trying to ruin Justin's reputation. Her words were angry and defensive, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I read through them once and then blocked the new number without responding. I felt tired more than anything else. Exhausted contempt for the woman who'd slapped me and thrown my belongings on the lawn. She still didn't get it and probably never would. Anna called me the next day and asked if I wanted to meet another survivor. Amy Hopkins had been assaulted by James 3 years ago, when they were both at a different college. She was willing to talk to me if I wanted to connect with someone who understood. I agreed immediately. We met at a coffee shop on Friday afternoon. Amy was younger than me, with red hair pulled back in a ponytail. We sat in a corner booth and talked for 2 hours. She described waking up confused and sore with no memory of the night before. Finding out later from friends that James had taken her home. The way he'd acted normal and friendly the next time she saw him. She'd reported it to campus police, but nothing happened because she couldn't prove anything. Talking to her felt different from talking to anyone else. She didn't need me to explain the specific horror of being violated while unconscious. She already knew. By the end of our coffee meeting, Amy and I had made a decision. We couldn't just wait around for the legal system to maybe do something before the wedding. Julianne needed to know what she was about to marry. Amy pulled out her phone and we searched for Julianne on social media. Found her pretty easily through Nikki's husband's profile. She had photos of herself and James looking happy. Pictures of wedding planning. Her account was public, so we could see everything. Amy and I worked together on writing a message. We kept it simple and factual. Explained that James had a history of assaulting women while they were unconscious. Said we had evidence and were working with police. Told her she deserved to know the truth before making this decision. We sent it from both our accounts so she'd see it wasn't just one person. Then we waited to see if she'd believe us, or if James had already convinced her that women like us were just jealous liars trying to ruin his happiness. My phone buzzed less than an hour after we sent the message. Julianne had responded. I opened it with shaking hands and read her words twice before the meaning sank in. She called us jealous liars trying to ruin her happiness. Said James had warned her about crazy exes who might try to sabotage their wedding. She was blocking both of us immediately, and we should be ashamed of ourselves. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Amy grabbed my phone and read the message herself, then threw it on the couch between us. Neither of us spoke for a long time. I wanted to scream or cry or throw something, but mostly I just felt hollow. We'd tried to warn her and she refused to listen, and now she was going to marry a predator in less than 3 weeks. Amy finally broke the silence by suggesting we call Anna, and I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. Anna answered on the second ring and listened while I explained what happened. Her voice stayed calm and steady while she reminded me that abuse victims often defend their abusers initially. She said we'd planted a seed of doubt in Julianne's mind even if she didn't want to admit it right now. The information was there and she couldn't unlearn it completely. Amy spoke up and suggested we contact Julianne's parents instead. Send them the information along with links to news articles about similar cases. Anna thought that was a good idea and offered to help us compile everything into a clear document that parents would take seriously. We spent the next hour putting together a folder with victim statements, news articles about college assault cases, and a timeline of James's pattern. Anna helped us write a letter explaining the situation without sounding hysterical or vengeful. We found Julianne's parents on social media through her profile and sent them everything with a subject line that said urgent information about your daughter's fiancé. Then we waited again. 2 days passed with no response from Julianne's parents. I worked double shifts at the restaurant trying to keep my mind busy, but every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. On Thursday afternoon, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. A man's voice asked if I was speaking to the right person, then introduced himself as Hank. Nikki's husband. My sister's husband, who I'd never met, was calling me out of nowhere. He said Nikki had told him everything before she went into hospice care. His voice cracked when he described learning what his wife had done to me, how she'd drugged me and set up the whole false cheating scenario. He kept apologizing even though none of it was his fault. Then he told me why he was really calling. Julianne was his little sister. He wanted to help protect her from James, but needed proof he could show his parents. They were traditional people who might not believe him without solid evidence. I told him I could meet him and show him what we had. He suggested a coffee shop halfway between us, and we agreed on Friday morning. I hung up and sat staring at my phone for 10 minutes. Nikki had finally told her husband the truth, and now her confession might actually save someone. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived on Friday. I spotted Hank immediately because he looked nervous and kept checking his phone. He stood when I approached and shook my hand formally. Then we both sat down with our drinks. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder Anna had helped us create. Hank's face went pale as he scrolled through the victim statements and news articles. He stopped on one photo that showed James at a party with his arm around a girl who looked barely conscious. His hands were shaking when he closed the laptop and pushed it back toward me. He said his parents were traditional and might not believe him at first, but he would do whatever it took to stop this wedding. His little sister was only 19 and had her whole life ahead of her. I told him about the videos on the flash drive and watched him go even paler. He asked if the police had the evidence, and I confirmed they were investigating. He pulled out his phone and said he was calling his parents right now, and I should stay in case they wanted to talk to me directly. He dialed and put the phone on speaker. His father answered, and Hank launched into an explanation about James's history. I could hear his father getting angry and defensive, saying they'd already paid for the venue and this was just cold feet. Hank's voice got louder and firmer as he explained this wasn't cold feet. This was about protecting Julianne from a dangerous predator. He told his father I was sitting right there with proof. His father demanded to speak with me. I explained everything to Julianne's father while Hank watched. Described the assault, the drugging, the pattern of victims, the police investigation. He interrupted several times asking questions about evidence and timelines. By the end of the call, his voice had changed from angry to worried. He said he needed to discuss this with his wife and they would call back. Hank and I sat in the coffee shop for another hour talking about Nikki. He told me she'd been sick for months before she finally confessed everything. Said she'd cried every night knowing what she'd done to me and how it had destroyed my life. He wanted me to know she genuinely regretted her actions, even if that didn't fix anything. I thanked him for the information but said I wasn't ready to forgive Nikki just because she felt bad at the end. He nodded and said he understood. His phone rang and it was his father calling back. They'd decided to pull all funding for the wedding immediately and demand Julianne postpone until they could investigate these allegations properly. Julianne was already furious and accusing them of sabotaging her relationship, but at least the wedding wouldn't happen in 10 days as planned. Hank thanked me for meeting him and promised to keep me updated. I drove home feeling like maybe we'd actually stopped something terrible from happening. That evening, Philip called with news. They had enough evidence to arrest James on multiple counts of sexual assault, drugging victims, and illegal recording. He was picked up today. The prosecutor was confident about getting convictions on at least some charges given the video evidence and multiple victim testimonies. I thanked him and hung up, then sat on my couch staring at nothing. James was actually being arrested. After 2 years of him walking around free, he was finally facing consequences. I called Amy and told her the news. She started crying on the phone and I realized I was crying too. We stayed on the phone for an hour just talking about everything, how surreal it felt, how we'd both been expecting him to get away with it somehow. Anna called me later that night to check in. She reminded me that justice doesn't erase trauma, and I was allowed to feel complicated emotions about all of this. I told her I felt relieved but also empty, like I'd been preparing for a fight that suddenly ended before I was ready. She said that was normal and we should schedule a session next week to process everything. 3 days after James's arrest, Hank called again. Nikki had died that morning. He invited me to the funeral and gave me the details about time and location. I thanked him and said I'd think about it. I spent the next 2 days trying to decide if I should go. Part of me wanted closure, wanted to see my family one last time, wanted to say goodbye to my sister despite everything. But the bigger part of me remembered being homeless because of her lies. Remembered Christmas when they all celebrated without me. Remembered 2 years of complete abandonment while they knew the truth. I called Hank back the morning of the funeral and told him I wasn't coming. He said he understood and didn't try to convince me otherwise. I felt guilty for about an hour, then realized I didn't owe Nikki or anyone else my forgiveness. Her deathbed confession didn't erase what she'd done or make the pain go away. I went to work instead and kept myself busy with lunch rush. A week later, I was working the morning shift when my mother showed up. I saw her through the front window heading toward the door with a determined look on her face. Before she could reach it, Nadine stepped outside and physically blocked the entrance. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see my mother's face getting red and angry. Nadine stood firm with her arms crossed, then pulled out her phone like she was about to call someone. My mother looked toward the window and saw me watching. She started yelling something, but Nadine moved to block her view and pointed toward the parking lot. My mother finally left and Nadine came back inside. She found me in the kitchen and asked if I was okay. I nodded, but tears started running down my face. Nadine pulled me into a hug and said that's what real family does. They protect each other. I cried in the kitchen for 20 minutes while she just held me. Hope brought me water and tissues without saying anything. When I finally stopped crying, Nadine told me my mother had been demanding to talk to me and making a scene. She'd told her to leave or she'd call the police. Watching someone protect me without hesitation made something shift inside my chest. These people who weren't related to me by blood had shown me more love in 2 years than my actual family had in my entire life. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the prosecutor's office. They wanted me to provide a victim impact statement for James's trial. The woman on the phone explained what it was and how it would be used during sentencing. I agreed immediately, but then spent the next 3 days staring at a blank document on my laptop. Anna offered to help me write it, and we met at her office on Thursday. She asked me questions about how the assault and everything that followed had affected my life. I started talking and couldn't stop. Told her about being homeless, losing my entire family, working 10-hour days in a tiny apartment, the nightmares, the trust issues, how I still flinch sometimes when men stand too close. She typed while I talked, organizing my words into something coherent. By the end of the session, we had a 3-page statement that captured everything. Reading it back made me cry, but also made me feel powerful. This was my truth, and James would have to hear it in court. I sent the statement to Philip and got a response the same day saying it was powerful and would help the case. 2 days later, Anna called asking if I'd be comfortable meeting Amy and 2 other victims who wanted to give statements too. She explained they were scared, but seeing my courage made them think they could do it. I said yes immediately because knowing I wasn't alone in this made everything feel less heavy. We met at the crisis center on Saturday morning, all sitting in a circle with Anna. Amy was there with a girl named Rebecca, who James assaulted sophomore year, and another woman named Michelle who he targeted at a party 3 years ago. We went around sharing our stories and I watched them cry while talking about waking up confused or finding photos they didn't remember taking. Rebecca said James drugged her drink at a campus event, and she woke up in his dorm with no memory of how she got there. Michelle said he offered to walk her home from a party, and she blacked out halfway there, waking up hours later in a strange apartment. After we all shared, Amy suggested we make a group chat to support each other through the legal process. We exchanged numbers, and within hours the chat was active with messages about court dates and therapy recommendations. Having 3 other women who understood exactly what I went through made me feel less crazy and less alone. That night, I texted the group saying I was scared about testifying and got back 3 messages immediately with encouragement and offers to practice together. Over the next few weeks, we met twice more to go over our statements with Anna and talk through what cross-examination might be like. 2 months after James got arrested, I was working a dinner shift when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it thinking it was spam, but something made me open it. The message said it was Julienne and she was sorry for not believing me before. I stared at the screen for a full minute trying to decide if I should respond or block the number. She sent another message saying she found James's collection on his laptop after the arrest, and it made her physically sick. She said she was in therapy now trying to process how close she came to marrying someone like that. I put my phone away and finished my shift, but kept thinking about her sitting alone trying to deal with this. She was only 19 and had been manipulated by someone she trusted. When I got home that night, I finally responded saying I appreciated her apology and understood why she didn't believe me at first. She wrote back immediately asking if we could meet for coffee because she had questions about how predators work and how she missed the signs. I thought about it for 2 days before agreeing to meet at a cafe downtown on my next day off. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived, and I spotted Julienne sitting in the corner looking nervous. She stood up when she saw me, and I could tell she'd been crying recently because her eyes were puffy. We sat down and she immediately apologized again, saying she felt stupid for defending James and attacking me online. I told her she wasn't stupid, that James was good at manipulation and made her think she knew him. She started crying and told me about finding folders on his computer labeled with girls' names and dates going back years. The police took the laptop as evidence, but she'd already seen enough to know he'd been doing this the whole time they dated. She said she kept thinking about their relationship and realizing all the red flags she ignored because she thought he loved her. I shared my own experience with James and how he seemed helpful and kind right before he assaulted me. We talked for 3 hours about how predators isolate victims and make them doubt their own judgment. She asked how I was coping, and I told her about therapy and the support group with Amy and the other victims. Her face lit up when I mentioned the group, and she asked if she could join even though her assault didn't happen. I texted Anna right there asking if Julienne could come to our next meeting, and Anna said yes immediately. Julienne cried again and thanked me for not hating her after how she treated me. I told her I understood she was a victim too, just in a different way, and we needed to support each other instead of fighting. 4 months after James got arrested, the trial date finally arrived. All 5 of us who gave statements showed up at the courthouse on the first day wearing matching purple ribbons Anna gave us. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, and seeing James sitting at the defense table in a suit made my stomach turn. He looked so normal and clean-cut, nothing like the monster I knew he was. The prosecutor was a woman in her 40s named Mrs. Ruiz, who met with us before the trial started. She explained the process and warned us that James's lawyer would try to discredit our stories and make us look like we were lying. The first 3 days were jury selection and opening statements. Mrs. Ruiz laid out the evidence, including the videos and the pattern of behavior spanning 5 years. James's lawyer argued that the encounters were consensual, and we were all making false accusations for attention. Watching him sit there looking innocent while his lawyer called us liars made me want to scream. Amy grabbed my hand during the opening statements, and I squeezed back hard. The next week, they called witnesses, including the forensic expert who analyzed the videos and confirmed they showed unconscious victims. Wallace testified about James bragging about his conquests and acting suspicious. Then it was our turn to testify. I went first and spent 2 hours on the stand describing what happened that night and how I woke up with no memory. James's lawyer tried to make it seem like I was drunk and consented, but Mrs. Ruiz objected, and the judge sustained it. Amy testified next and broke down crying when describing her assault. Rebecca and Michelle gave similar accounts. The last victim was a girl named Sarah, who James assaulted just 6 months before his arrest. Watching James try to look sympathetic while we testified made me sick. His lawyer kept suggesting we were all lying for money or revenge, but the jury looked disgusted by his tactics. The trial lasted 3 weeks total with expert witnesses and character testimony. On the final day, Mrs. Ruiz gave a powerful closing argument about predators who use drugs and alcohol to assault vulnerable women. The jury deliberated for 2 days before coming back with a verdict. We all held hands in the courtroom when the judge asked for the verdict. The foreman stood up and said guilty on 8 counts of sexual assault and illegal recording. James's face went white and his lawyer immediately started talking about appeals. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, and we all walked out of the courtroom together. Sentencing day came on a cold morning in late November. We all wore the purple ribbons again and sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table. The judge asked if anyone wanted to make a victim impact statement before sentencing. All 5 of us stood up and took turns reading our statements. I went last and my voice shook while I read about losing my family and being homeless and spending 2 years thinking I was crazy. When I finished, the judge nodded and thanked us for our courage. Then she looked at James and said his actions showed a pattern of predatory behavior and complete lack of remorse. She sentenced him to 12 years in prison with mandatory registration as a sex offender for life. It wasn't as much as I wanted. I'd hoped for 20 years at least. But Mrs. Ruiz told us later that 12 years was actually more than most assault cases get. Amy grabbed my hand when the sentence was read and we both started crying. The other victims joined us and we all hugged in the courtroom while James was led away in handcuffs. Outside in the hallway, we cried together for 20 minutes. Not sad tears, but relief tears mixed with anger that it took so long. Anna took us all to lunch after and we talked about what came next. The trial was over, but the healing was just starting. 3 days after the sentencing, Justin left me a voicemail. I saw his name on my phone and almost didn't listen to it. The message started with him saying he was glad I got justice and the right thing happened. Then he said he hoped we could move forward and maybe talk about everything that happened. His voice sounded fake and rehearsed like he was reading from a script. I deleted the message halfway through and blocked his number. Amy texted asking if I was okay because she knew Justin had been trying to contact me. I told her I was done with him and felt nothing but pity for how pathetic he sounded. She sent back a thumbs up and said good riddance. That night I sat in my apartment thinking about everything that happened over the past 6 months. The trial was over, James was in prison, and I had a support system of people who actually cared about me. Justin trying to worm his way back into my life just showed he never changed and never would. I thought about responding to tell him off, but realized he didn't deserve any more of my energy. Anna gave me the name of a trauma therapist who specialized in sexual assault cases. I called and made an appointment for the following week. The therapist's name was Dr. Rachel, and her office was in a quiet building near the crisis center. Our first session was just talking about my history and what I wanted to work on. I told her about the assault and the family betrayal, and how I still had nightmares most nights. She explained that trauma therapy would involve processing the memories in a safe way and learning coping strategies. The sessions were harder than I expected because Dr. Rachel made me talk about details I'd been trying to forget. Some weeks I left her office feeling exhausted and raw, like someone had scraped out my insides. Other weeks I felt lighter, like I'd put down something heavy I'd been carrying. We worked on techniques for managing panic attacks and intrusive thoughts. Dr. Rachel taught me grounding exercises for when I felt overwhelmed. After 2 months of weekly sessions, I noticed the nightmares were less frequent. I still had bad days where everything felt too hard, but I was learning to ride them out instead of spiraling. The group chat with the other victims helped too because they understood the specific kind of trauma we shared. Slowly, I started feeling less like a victim stuck in the past, and more like a survivor actively healing and moving forward. 5 months after the trial ended, Violet came to my apartment looking nervous. She sat down on my couch and said my father had contacted her asking if I'd consider meeting with him. I felt my chest tighten and asked what he wanted. Violet said he'd called her 3 times in the past week saying he realized how wrong the family was and wanted to apologize. She made it clear she didn't think I owed him anything, but wanted to pass along the message. I spent the next 2 weeks thinking about it constantly. Part of me wanted to ignore him completely, but another part wanted to hear him admit what they did. I talked about it in therapy, and Dr. Rachel said I should only meet him if I felt emotionally ready and had clear boundaries. After 3 weeks, I told Violet I'd agree to one coffee meeting with her present, and made it clear I wasn't promising reconciliation or forgiveness. Violet called my father back and set up the meeting for the following Saturday at a cafe near my apartment. The morning of the meeting, I almost canceled twice. Violet picked me up and we drove to the cafe together with her, reminding me I could leave anytime. My father was already sitting at a table in the back when we arrived. He stood up when he saw me, and I could see he'd aged a lot in 2 years. His hair was grayer and he had new lines around his eyes. We sat down, and there was awkward silence for a minute before he started talking. He said he was sorry for everything, and he knew sorry wasn't enough. Then he started crying, actual tears running down his face while I sat there feeling mostly numb. He said they all knew within a week that I was telling the truth because Wallace told them at a family dinner. My mother had convinced everyone to maintain the lie rather than admit they made a horrible mistake. He said they were too proud and too invested in the narrative they created. Hearing him say it out loud didn't make me feel better like I thought it would. Instead, I felt angry that it took him 2 years and a criminal trial to finally admit the truth. He kept apologizing and saying he understood if I never forgave him. Violet sat next to me the whole time with her hand on my arm for support. When my father finally stopped crying, I took a deep breath and told him I appreciated his apology, but I wasn't ready to have him back in my life. I said I might never be ready for that and he needed to accept it. He nodded and said he understood he destroyed my trust and couldn't demand I rebuild it on his timeline. He asked if he could at least know how I was doing, and I said no. That ship had sailed when he chose Justin's lie over his own daughter. Violet squeezed my arm and I stood up to leave. My father started to say something else, but I cut him off and said we were done. Walking out of that cafe, I felt lighter than I had in months. I'd spent 2 years wondering if my family would ever admit they were wrong, and now I had my answer. It didn't change anything or fix the damage, but at least I knew the truth. 6 months after the trial ended, Nadine called me into her office at the restaurant during the lunch rush. She closed the door behind me and gestured for me to sit down, which made my stomach drop because I thought maybe I'd messed something up. Instead, she pulled out a folder and slid it across her desk toward me. Inside was a contract for the full manager position with a salary that made my eyes go wide. She said I'd earned it through hard work and showing up every single day even when things were hard, and she trusted me to run the place. I started crying right there in her office because for the first time in years, I felt like someone believed in me based on what I'd actually done, not who my family was or what had happened to me. The raise meant I could finally afford to take some college classes online, something I'd completely given up on after my family kicked me out, and I was just trying to survive. Nadine hugged me and told me to go splash water on my face before the dinner shift started, and I floated through the rest of that day feeling like maybe I was building something real. I enrolled in criminal justice courses that fall semester, because working with Anna and watching the legal system actually work for once made me want to help other survivors get through it. The classes were harder than I expected since I hadn't been in the school for years, but I stayed up late studying after my shifts and slowly started getting the hang of it. Violet came over one night while I was reading about victim advocacy programs and said I was going to be the world's most understanding victim advocate someday, and she was probably right. I understood what it felt like to not be believed, to have everyone turn against you, to feel like the system was designed to protect everyone except the person who got hurt. Taking those classes made me feel like I was taking all that pain and turning it into something that could actually help people, instead of just carrying it around forever. Our survivor support group kept growing over the next few months until we had 8 women meeting twice a month at the crisis center. Amy and I started running the meetings together because Anna said we had a way of making people feel safe enough to share their stories without judgment. It was powerful sitting in that circle listening to other women talk about their experiences and realizing we all had similar feelings of shame and anger and confusion, even though our specific situations were different. We shared resources about therapists and lawyers, talked about coping strategies that actually worked and just existed in a space where nobody questioned whether we were telling the truth. Turning my trauma into something that helped others feel less alone made the whole nightmare feel slightly less pointless, like maybe some good could come from it after all. Julianne started coming to our meetings about 3 months after the trial ended, and she became close friends with several of us pretty quickly. She was still processing how close she'd come to marrying someone who would have hurt her eventually, and being around other survivors helped her understand that predators are good at hiding what they really are. She signed up for self-defense classes and changed her major to psychology because she wanted to understand how she'd missed all the warning signs with him. Watching her transform her fear into determination felt like the one genuinely good thing that came from this whole mess, and I was glad she had our group to support her through it. A year after Nikki died, Hank sent me photos of his baby daughter who'd been born 2 months earlier. He'd named her after his late wife, which I thought was sweet, even though thinking about Nikki still made my chest feel tight. In his message, he said he was telling his daughter stories about her aunt that focused on the good moments they'd had together. But he'd make sure she knew the whole complicated truth when she was old enough to understand that people aren't just one thing. I wrote back congratulating him and thanking him for being honest about who Nikki really was, the good and the bad, because pretending she was perfect would have felt like another lie. Looking at those baby photos made me think about how life just keeps moving forward, even after terrible things happen, and new people get born who have no idea about all the pain that came before them. I realized one morning that I'd gone almost 2 weeks without having nightmares about the assault, which was the longest stretch since it happened. When I did have bad dreams now, I could use the breathing exercises and grounding techniques my therapist taught me to calm myself down instead of spiraling for hours. Healing wasn't a straight line like I'd hoped it would be. I still had days where getting out of bed felt impossible, and everything reminded me of what happened. But those bad days were getting further apart, separated by more and more good days where I felt almost normal. My therapist kept reminding me that trauma changes you permanently, and healing doesn't mean going back to who you were before. It means learning to live fully as the person you are now. Violet decided I needed to start dating again and set me up with her cousin who was visiting from out of state for a week. I almost canceled 3 times before the actual date because the idea of sitting across from someone new and trying to act normal made me want to throw up. The date itself was awkward but not terrible. We went to a movie and then got coffee after, and he was nice enough even though there was zero spark between us. But it felt good to prove to myself that I could sit across from a man without having a panic attack, that I could make small talk and laugh at jokes and just be a regular person on a regular date. When he texted asking for a second date, I politely declined, but I was glad Violet had pushed me to try. The acceptance letter from the social work program arrived on a Tuesday morning before my shift at the restaurant. I opened it standing in my kitchen and had to read it 3 times before I believed what it said. Full scholarship based on my essay about surviving assault and family abandonment. I started crying happy tears for the first time in years, actual tears of joy instead of grief or anger or frustration. Nadine threw me a surprise party that night after we closed the restaurant, with a cake that said future social worker in purple frosting, and everyone from the support group showed up to celebrate. Standing in that room surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me and were proud of what I'd accomplished made me realize I'd built a real life here, one that nobody could take away from me. My mother made one final attempt to reach out through a long letter that my father delivered to the restaurant. I took it home and read it that night, and every word just made me angrier, because she spent 6 pages making excuses and trying to explain why she'd done what she did without actually taking responsibility. She said she'd been protecting the family's reputation, and Justin had seemed so certain I'd cheated, and she just wanted to keep the peace. Reading her try to justify slapping me and throwing me out made my blood boil, and I wrote back exactly 1 sentence telling her I'd moved on with my life, and she wasn't part of it anymore. I mailed it the next day and felt genuinely free for the first time since this whole thing started, like I'd finally closed a door that had been hanging open for years. 2 years after everything fell apart, I was finishing my degree while running the restaurant successfully, and helping lead a survivor support group that had grown to include dozens of women over time. I still had complicated feelings about my family and what they'd done to me, moments where I missed my dad or wondered what holidays would have been like if none of this had happened. But I'd built a chosen family with Violet and Nadine and Hope and Amy and all the other survivors who understood what I'd been through without needing explanations. We celebrated each other's wins and showed up during the hard times, and nobody ever made me feel like I had to forgive people who didn't deserve it or pretend to be over trauma that still affected me every day. My life looked completely different from what I'd imagined at 21 when I was planning a wedding, but it was mine in a way that old life never really was. I'm at the restaurant when my phone buzzes with a text from Amy that just says "denied" in all caps followed by 3 celebration emojis. My hands shake as I read her follow-up message explaining that James went before the parole board yesterday, and they turned him down flat, citing his complete lack of genuine remorse and the serious nature of his crimes against multiple women. He won't be eligible to apply again for another 3 years minimum, which means he'll serve at least half his sentence before he can even try. I text back immediately asking if we can do an emergency group meeting tonight to celebrate, and within an hour everyone's confirmed they can make it to Violet's apartment. We order pizza and sit around her living room passing around Amy's phone to read the official parole board statement. And there's something powerful about seeing our trauma validated in legal language that calls James dangerous and unrepentant. Hope raises her soda can in a toast to justice actually working for once, and we all clink our drinks together, knowing that for at least a few more years, James is exactly where he belongs and can't hurt anyone else. The next week, I'm shopping for groceries when I turn down the cereal aisle and nearly walk straight into Justin's mother reaching for a box of cornflakes. She freezes when she sees me, her hand still extended toward the shelf, and I can see her trying to decide whether to pretend she didn't notice me or say something. She chooses to speak, her voice soft and apologetic as she tells me she's been wanting to reach out for months to say how sorry she is about everything that happened. I stand there holding my basket with one hand and look at her without any of the anger I used to feel, just a tired sort of acceptance that some things can't be fixed. I tell her as politely as I can that I appreciate her wanting to apologize, but that ship sailed a long time ago, and I need her to respect that I've moved on with my life without her or her son in it. Her face crumples a little and she looks like she wants to argue or explain, but instead she just nods slowly and turns back to the cereal shelf. I walk past her to grab my own box of granola and head to the checkout, feeling proud of myself for standing firm in my boundaries without being cruel or letting old pain make me lash out at her. 3 months later, Julianne calls me sounding happier than I've heard her in years, talking so fast I can barely understand her at first. She met someone in her therapy group 6 months ago, a guy who's been working through his own family trauma and actually understands what she went through with James. They've been taking things slow and honest, and last night he proposed in the most low-key way possible by just asking her during a walk if she'd want to build a life together. She's calling to ask if I'll come to the wedding as an honored guest. Not a bridesmaid because she knows that might be too much, but someone important who she wants there to witness this new chapter. I'm genuinely touched that after everything, she wants to share this moment with me, and I tell her I'd be honored to attend. The wedding is small and simple, held in a community garden on a Saturday afternoon with maybe 40 people total. Watching her marry someone who looks at her with genuine respect and kindness, who knows her whole story and loves her anyway, feels like closing a circle that started with so much pain and manipulation. At the reception, Julianne asks me to give a toast, and I stand up in front of the survivor group members who came to support her and talk about second chances and chosen family. I keep it short because I'm not great at public speaking, but I say that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to the people who will help us heal. And that family isn't always the people you're born to, but the ones who show up when you need them most. Half the survivor group is here celebrating with us. Women who understand what it means to rebuild your life after someone tries to destroy it, and there's something beautiful about seeing Julianne start fresh with someone who actually deserves her. The whole thing makes the past 2 years of hard work, and therapy and legal battles feel worth it, knowing that at least one good thing came from all that darkness. 2 years after starting my degree, I'm walking across a stage in a cheap polyester gown to accept my bachelor's degree in social work. Nadine and Violet and Hope are in the third row cheering louder than anyone else, and I can see Amy and the whole survivor group scattered throughout the audience holding signs they made. My father texted me last week asking if he could attend, and after talking it through with my therapist, I told him he could watch from the back, but we wouldn't be taking family photos together or pretending everything is fine. I spot him standing in the very last row during the ceremony, and when I walk past after getting my diploma, he gives me a small nod that I return before moving on. The celebration afterward at the restaurant is exactly what I need, surrounded by people who actually showed up for me during the hard years, who never asked me to forgive people who didn't deserve it, or pretend my trauma wasn't real. The Crisis Center calls 3 weeks after graduation to offer me a position as a victim advocate, the same job Anna does that I've been dreaming about since I first met her. I start the following Monday and spend my first week shadowing Anna as she meets with assault survivors, helps them file police reports, explains their legal options in language that makes sense. She becomes my mentor in this new career, teaching me how to balance empathy with boundaries, how to validate someone's trauma without taking it on as my own. Working with assault survivors and helping them navigate the legal system feels like the most meaningful work I've ever done, like I'm taking everything terrible that happened to me and using it to make someone else's path a little less brutal. Every time I help a woman file a restraining order or connect her with a trauma therapist, or just sit with her while she cries about what happened, I feel like I'm becoming the person I needed when I was at my lowest. 3 years after the assault, I'm in a healthy relationship with someone I met through a friend of Violet's, someone who knows my whole story and never makes me feel broken or damaged because of it. We're taking things slow because I still have trust issues that pop up at weird times, moments where I panic if he touches me when I'm not expecting it, or I need space after we've been together for too long. He's patient with all of it, never pushes me to move faster than I'm ready for, and therapy has taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending I'm completely over it. Healing means learning to live fully despite the trauma, building a life where the assault is part of my history, but not the thing that defines my entire existence. Some days are still hard and I still have nightmares sometimes, but they're getting less frequent and I have tools now to calm myself down instead of spiraling. Amy and I spend 6 months writing an article about our experience for a national magazine that focuses on assault survivors and the legal system. We go through dozens of drafts trying to find the right balance between being honest about the trauma and not making it so graphic that readers can't handle it, between protecting our privacy and being vulnerable enough that other survivors will connect with our story. When it finally publishes, the response is overwhelming in the best way, with dozens of women reaching out through the magazine to say our story gave them courage to report their own assaults or leave abusive situations. Knowing that by sharing the worst thing that ever happened to us, we've helped other people feel less alone, makes the vulnerability of putting it all out there feel worth it. Like we've taken something terrible and transformed it into something that might actually save someone else. I buy my first house 18 months into my advocacy job, using money I saved from the restaurant combined with my new salary to put a down payment on a small 2-bedroom place with a backyard. Violet helps me paint every room in bright colors that make me happy, yellows and blues, and one accent wall in deep purple that reminds me of the support group and everything we've built together. Having a space that's completely mine, that no one can kick me out of or take away, Feels like the ultimate reclaiming of my independence after spending those first months sleeping on friends' couches and in that tiny apartment above the restaurant. I hang photos of my chosen family on every wall, pictures from Julian's wedding and my graduation, and random nights at the restaurant, visual proof that I built something real and good from the ashes of my old life. Looking back at everything that happened, I realize I'm genuinely happy now in a way I never was before the betrayal. Back when I was planning a wedding to someone who didn't really love me and trying to please a family that would abandon me the second it was convenient, I have meaningful work helping survivors navigate trauma, authentic friendships built on honesty instead of obligation, healthy boundaries with toxic family members who don't get to be part of my life anymore, and a sense of purpose that came from transforming my trauma into advocacy that might actually help other people. The path here was brutal and involved losing everything I thought mattered, watching my sister destroy my life out of jealousy, and learning that my family chose maintaining a lie over admitting they were wrong. I wouldn't wish any of it on anyone, but I'm proud of the strong and compassionate person I've become through surviving it, proud of the life I've built on my own terms with people who actually deserve to be in it. I'm excited about the future in a way I never was when I was 21 and engaged, because now I know exactly who I am and what I'm capable of surviving, and nobody can take that away from me.